in place. The provincial policy statement was being rewritten to make it requirement rather than just having regard for it. So the doors were closing. The province was getting involved very deeply in the planning of cities because we're in a situation in the Greater Toronto Area, Hamilton, of being the most congested region, urban region in North America. And sprawl has been a disaster for us in terms of the economy, in terms of the functioning of our road system and our transportation system and so on. So the province is basically trying to lay down some rules. The city didn't express any enthusiasm for those directions and may be doing this as a last grab to get as much land inside the urban boundary as possible before the doors close completely. And the province is involved in battles with a number of municipalities around the province that are also not enthusiastic about various aspects of places to grow. So, you know, it may be convinced not to fight this one because it's got other ones to fight and so on.
I owned the vacant frost fence property, which looks like about 15 acres or so down on Burlington Street, quite close to around Burlington and Lockridge.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few properties like that. I would want to go to the OMB and say, the city appears to be spending my taxes in order to expand an industrial area and shut me out of the market. But I don't see any of those people there.
No.
The owners of the Bayfront and other vacant lands don't appear to be at that hearing.
I think the difficulty that would keep those people out is that going to the Interior Municipal Board is not free. It's an expensive process. If you want to be a party there, and this hearing is going to go on for probably multiple weeks, you need to have a lawyer, and you need to commit to having that lawyer there for the entire run. Unless you're just a citizen, you can go in and say, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be it. But you basically are required to go through the whole process. If you own a piece of land, the decision to not proceed here is not going to sell your land. You're not necessarily going to make any money off that at all. You're in the same position that we're in as taxpayers saying, you know, the money here being spent here would be far better spent elsewhere in the community, but, you know, I'm not going to make any profit off the fact that the money gets spent somewhere else in the community. And if you've got a piece on Burlington Street somewhere, you can pretty legitimately argue if the sewers don't work, the city's got to fix them. If the water system is decrepit, it's got to be repaired because you're in the urban boundary, you have a right to continued services. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of financial argument for that owner to jump in here. There are certainly people who have argued that the brownfields should really be called goldfields because they've got all those services. They're on the water, they're on the harbor front, where reasonably as the price of fuel goes up, that's going to be an increasingly popular way to move goods. They're on the major highways, they're on the rail lines. The airport has the advantage of being an airport. And the cargo that's flying out of the airport at this point is almost all couriers. So Perlators up there, FedEx and that sort of thing, largely because we fly all night in Hamilton. But there's not a lot of use of the airport for the movement of goods, which is one of the underlying arguments as to why this is a good place to put an industrial business park.
John, I'm just wondering if you had a few other points you wanted to...
I think I should probably... There's lots of things that I could go on to, but I think really you should let Larry in here, because I haven't talked much about the financial implications, and I think that's more what Larry's been interested in, so maybe we can go there, and we can bounce around. And I've got some other slides that people have.
Okay, yeah, great. If one of your slides speak up one of Larry's points there. I forgot to make an important announcement, since there is a copy. There's also bathrooms. You go around the half wall where it says exit, and the bathrooms are there. So, this is one of these facilities. And you're up, Larry. Thank you.
Very good. First of all, I don't have a fraction of the things to say that Don does, so I won't be nearly as long. But I learned about the Aerotropolis, I think 2009, 2010. And it was Michael over there with Hamiltonians for Progressive Development that put on a presentation up in Ancaster. And we really owe Michael gratitude for the tremendous amount of work and time that Hamiltonians for Progressive Development put into the first phase of trying to get the awareness levels up on this. So thank you very much, Michael.
It's Michael and Michael's wife who actually feel this.
And so when I see some really good people like Michael and Don, you know, interested in something like this and trying to increase awareness, I just want to jump in and try to help out where I can. But this Aerotropolis issue it's so big and it's so complex, and it's amazing that just a tiny fraction of the population even knows anything about it whatsoever. 99 out of 100 people, you ask them about this, and it doesn't matter if they're financial people or legal people, they don't seem to know about this issue. So as part of the Hamilton Civic League, we thought it was a very important issue that we wanted to get involved with to help with the communication side. I'm really grateful that Don and Environment Hamilton and Hamiltonians for Progressive Development are doing all the technical side of this, all the O&B and the legal side of that. I'm not interested in that, other than supporting the work that you do. And so when you, it might have been the Hamilton Civic League that you heard from that asked you to be a participant or to consider participant status, but you may have also heard it from that. So, you know, I just been making notes all night here. Some of my issues are food lands. I attended a food security meeting at the Hamilton Spectator, and former Mayor Fred was one of the panelists there, and I asked a question, and I asked, why is it that our politicians and city staff always want our city to grow? And I was amazed, because just as the last word came out of my mouth, the room exploded in applause, right? A lot of people are asking the same question. Why is it that we always have to grow, right? And it really leads to our whole economic system. Our economic system set up where if we don't have growth of 2 or 3% per year, then we're in trouble. Which means if everybody just does exactly what they did last year, this year, our economy is in trouble. They're worried that it's going to be collapsing or whatever. Which means, if it's 2 or 3% every year, our economy has to double every 33 years. Which means we have to pave over 100% more farmland, we have to pull 100% more fish out of the oceans, and we have to cut down 100% more trees. And you don't have to be an accountant or some sort of professional to see that's not sustainable. Our entire economic system is not sustainable. And it really is. So when Don tonight said that the city bought George Chevalier's land for $70,000 an acre, I disagree. The city made me buy those lands for $70,000 and made you buy those lands. And overnight, you may have gone to your job and worked to better yourself, better your financial situation, but government just made a decision that put you in debt, right? You got to pay for that at some point in time. And that's just a small fraction of all the steps that government makes on your behalf, and reportedly to improve the situation for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, future generations. But some of these decisions just are ridiculous. We can look back at things like the 407 ETR, how we paid for all of that development, and then the government either sold it or leased it off, and now businesses are making dollars off of that. And now the current government wants to extend the 407 ETR. We had Skydome that we all paid for, right? And it got sold off at a fraction of its original cost. I'm really not sure how government is coming up with these priorities, but it doesn't appear to be for our best purposes. So some of the things, as part of the Hamilton Civic League, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a leader. I I don't really like being told what to do or how to do it. If I have to have any form of government, I want that to be an efficient form of government. I want that to be a government that prioritizes things that benefit the entire community and not just a few. In this city, I think that we should be looking at green jobs. It's my understanding that this project here, this $350 million, that's what they claim it's going to be. And we always know what happens with the costs. They go up and up. But we have some choices to make in this community. We can correct some long-standing problems with brownfields, or we can invest and destroy some green fields. At some point in time, there's got to be the point where we finally say, we're going to clean up the mess we already made. We're going to take the lands that we already have, and we're going to make them productive lands that can contribute to the local economy, instead of just sitting there idle or vacant or underutilized. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How come public doesn't have input in any of these decisions? We don't know about them.
So
What can we do to change that?
So our system is broken, and really, we are at least 50% responsible for the broken system that we have because we've allowed it to get to this point. There's this great movement now starting up for what's referred to as direct democracy, and right where the people decide what's going to be done, or the people end up having a veto over what the government, have the power to veto what the government's rules are put in place. And apparently this exists in some parts of the world. And I know that even just a little taste of it is coming in Brian McCaddy's ward, is it not?
In this ward here,
You
yes.
want to explain what's happening there?
Councillor McCaddy, and I don't know the details of this, so I stand to be corrected on some of the aspects of it. But in general, Councillor McCaddy is launching a process called participatory budgeting, which has been done in some parts of the world, in which the community is asked to decide what the government's dollars should be spent on in their community. And the reason it's happening here is that when the area rating decision was made a year ago, it meant that the suburban areas would start paying taxes similar to the urban area, the old city of Hamilton, and that the taxes in the old city of Hamilton would go down as the ones in the suburbs came up. And the going down portion in the old city was considered to be politically unacceptable to the suburbs in particular. So the deal was cut that the monies that, instead of lowering the taxes in Hamilton, a portion of taxes would be allocated only to the older city and for the infrastructure of the old city, and the councillors would get to decide how that got used within their ward. So Councillor McCaddy has taken the position, as I understand it, that the portion that he's been allocated, he is asking the community to decide how it should be used. There are places, Porto Alegre is the big example, I think, where much of the budget of the municipal government is actually decided in this kind of a process. But what he's doing is setting up a committee of 20 people to advise him on this, and then they will make recommendations which will go to public meetings in the ward, and the decision of those public meetings will be the decision that is proceeded with, in terms of, do you want some sidewalks fixed over here, do you want the roads improved, do you want to put some money into the recreation center, do you want to improve the parks in some way, whatever.
He's looking for people to sit on that right
And
now.
there's an advertisement that's appeared in the newspaper in the last couple of weeks.
So this Ward 1 is the only one that's doing that?
Ward 1 is the only one that I'm aware of doing it. There's only been one ad that's appeared, and that's been from him.
I'm gonna put the lights on so you guys don't become voices in the dark.
So I guess to get back to where we are with this process, and
the government is there to represent us. We are the government. I mean, theoretically, that's our democracy, and that's right now what we have to deal with. So council votes on things representing us because we, the people, voted them into office. And unless there are delegations that occur while these reports to council are up for approval to council or to the standing committees that report to council, which is, you know, and they're open to any kind of delegation. So part of it goes back to how disengaged or engaged people feel with their local government or not. And municipal governments have the lowest rate of voting of any level. Has this not been in the Spectator? And I'm sorry, I'm not a local paper reader, so I know of this through other avenues.
You're lucky.
But, because if you say people aren't aware, has it not been covered?
The media coverage, there was a fair bit when the idea of Aerotropolis was kicked around in the early part of the last decade. And then when the council moved ahead and voted to expand the urban boundary in a very quick process in the spring, summer of 2005. And then it got blocked at the intermunicipal board. Everything seemed to sort of go below the radar. So there hasn't been much media coverage of what's taking place. And from having gone through the experience of Red Hill, and there was lots of media coverage from Red Hill, and I was chair for 12 years in that process, chair of Friends of Red Hill. I have a deep suspicion that the powers that be were not very happy about that kind of debate, and they wanted to make sure that didn't happen here. So the meetings that have been held about this have been held out in Mount Hope, in the old community center there. Citizens were not allowed to speak to those meetings. They were a community liaison committee that was established. It was handpicked. It was overwhelmingly people who supported the process. And the only two opponents were Environment Hamilton and Hamiltonians for Progressive Development.
So they stack the deck because obviously the city, whoever the city is within planning, whoever has the most power is really sold and wants this idea to go ahead. Yet it costs the city money to put in residential. It's not like we as a community gain money because the development fees are very low and don't pay for all of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and the argument certainly in terms of industrial development is that we make money off industrial development. So one of the arguments being made by the city is that if this works, if we get all the development that we hope we can get here, we'll get 24,000 more jobs, and we'll get $50 to $60 million more a year in taxes.
With a lower level of infrastructure required than residential.
Well, yes, it's certainly you require less infrastructure for these processors. You require less city spending in terms of not so much the infrastructure, but in the operating costs.
Don't they have to build that great big sewage pipe for industrial?
Yeah, and that's a piece that interestingly didn't get included in the cost. When they came out with the cost figures, Larry quoted $353 million for the infrastructure, the pipes, the roads and so on within this area. They only looked at what was within the boundaries of this. But they have to build these this sewer and water lines. The sewer line is already in the budget in terms of we know how it would cost. And it's $126 million. And some of it may be used to service the future growth in El Friday, if that ever happens. But the majority of it appears to be directed solely for the airport. So most of it is going through a rural area where it can't be used to get to the airport. So that piece is there. In addition, the water pipe, which they don't have a price on yet. And then we're doing a massive expansion of the sewage treatment plant and a revamp of that plant. And that's an $800 million project, which has now been has been delayed 5 years because the finance people are saying, we don't see the development charge money coming in to pay for this. We're not sure that that's going to happen at anywhere near the rate that we predicted because the population numbers aren't showing up. But that's a huge thing, and that's going to move our debt load up very dramatically.
Hey Don, I was wondering, do you think it's worth going through the other two slides just so we have a full picture of the situation. Like the one irony in this whole project, I've been involved quite a bit too, we can't even find someone to defend it. And yet it's the biggest, most expensive project you can imagine. And we, like, because we've been having all these discussions and we say, you know, all these things, reasons not to proceed, yet we can't find anyone to tell us why we should proceed.
So I'd like to speak to that.
Chancellor.
I'd like to speak to that. So, you know what, ahead of the election, just before the 2010 municipal election, this thing got pushed through our local council, right? Just 2-3 weeks before. And afterwards, my budget, I wasn't a candidate, but my budget for the election was higher than most of the candidates because I sent 100,000 letters out to alert people about this to try to make it an election issue. And I don't know if that almost cost Brenda her seat or if that helped Brenda get her seat, but in either case, what should be noted is that it's almost impossible to defeat an incumbent in an election. It's almost impossible. It's so difficult to do. And the only incumbent that lost their seat in the last election was Dave Mitchell, the incumbent for the area covered by the Aerotropolis, right? That says something. And I know that that was an issue that Councillor Johnson took out to the people door to door. And so it's possible to say that the people in that area have already voted that this is not something that they support because the champion of this Aerotropolis initiative was Councillor Mitchell, and he's no longer there. So the question now is, who in council champions this thing? I'm not sure there is a champion any longer, and our council possesses the authority and the power to pull the plug on this thing. If enough of us, if enough neighborhood associations get together and all approach our councillors, we can play that lobbying game and try to convince them to pull the plug on this. And that's really the side that the Civic League is looking at. Trying to get more neighborhood associations started, get more of them involved, get them networked. And the reporter from the Specs, asked me tonight, why should Strathcona care? Right? Why should you care? This is not in your backyard, right? This is far away. This, right? It doesn't affect you, but it affects everyone. Peter put together this wonderful poster. Peter and Michael putting together this wonderful poster. And what it does is it shows the cost per, you have that? Great. There it is. So this shows you the cost that each ward is going to have to put into the AEGD, right? So you can divide that by the number of citizens within that ward. Find out it's somewhere around, is it $1,000?
Yeah, we said $1,000 per man, woman, and child.
$1,000 per man, woman, and child.
And that's conservative.
Are getting sucked into this AEGD, right? What would you do with that money in Strathcona, right, to improve your community? And how is any of this in the AEGD benefiting your community? And I want to sort of take that message out to the businesses. I own a business. There's no benefit to my business to have this AEGD develop. I ask people, if you have Carmen's, right? If you have a banquet center, do you want another banquet center in the area to compete with your business, right? What new types of businesses are coming in here that we don't already have? As far as I understand, there's nobody lined up to go into these lands, and yet they want to commit Strathcona dollars towards this, and every other community's dollars towards this. It's your money. Get up and say something about it. Don't allow them to spend your money this way. Let them know what the alternatives are, right? What you think should be done in your community. If your councillor's not hearing from you, then your silence is basically approving this plan.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying, but one of the things that, unfortunately, Hamilton is Hamilton, and it sort of, if this was going on in, let's say, Toronto or Ottawa or anywhere else, it'd get national attention. And in Hamilton, it doesn't even get the spectators' attention. So I think the media is part of, and also citizen apathy, but the media is part of the problem, is that everything is happening behind closed doors. And everything about this, to me, stinks. I mean, financially, it smells of corruption, it smells, the whole thing stinks. And, you know, I just wish that some of this would be on in the Claims magazine or something else to basically embarrass these idiots who are running the city to say, like, defend yourself. What are you
I don't think
doing?
they care. I don't think they can be
But we can
chained.
rally our counselors, like you said earlier, if we all.
There's only one counselor
That's here. So the thing is that you feel that this is not appropriate way of using your money.
No,
This
of
is
course not. No,
right?
I agree with
So you need to commit, and everyone needs to commit to speaking about this and getting the word out. It's all about communication. And just, if enough people find out about it, if enough people come to events like this, where they really get to hear both sides, and actually the Civic League did exactly this, and we had Porcel, and I think we had,
I should have got your ass.
well, this was ahead of the election that we did that, and we didn't have much better, you know, change of opinion. You know, it was identical. People just walked away scratching their heads. Why are we doing this?
Has anybody contacted or sent the information to Marketplace or Fifth Estate or W5, those kinds of the national investigative journalism programs? Because you say they love things that smell like corruption and stink.
You know,
That's what they're all about.
I've sent a detailed email to Paul Burton, diddly. I've sent the same email to the Globe and Mail and to the person investigating the Orange situation. So somebody must be looking into this.
Well, all of us need to spend.
Yeah.
I think more than one.
There's
Yeah.
a lot, I mean, we're in Hamilton and we sort of, you know, have a lot of familiarity with what we think of the town and the way it's run, but I suspect that our problems are not unique in many respects, and that there's this land development is an extremely lucrative process. And it has, the sprawl that's taken place all across Ontario, all across the country, in the US as well, hasn't happened because it wasn't lucrative. It happened because it was lucrative.
For
So-
some percentage of the population.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for a
And it
small
costs-
percentage,
Look what happened in the States.
Yeah.
They built and built and built, and now the whole
and
country's
it's,
going.
and if you think about how this process probably unfolded, the people who had the most interest in this were the landowners in there. And I'm sure that they were doing their best to get this inside the urban boundary. You go to the landowners who have land up in the Elfrida area, and the city, the province says basically you cannot add anything to the urban boundary without proving that you need it. So the city tried an end run on that in its official plan. The city put into its official plan that in the future we're going to expand our urban boundary around Elfrida for residential development.
Where is that?
And Elfrida is the area, sort of a hockey stick around the
There's a
corner.
map up there.
Can I show it from here? Yeah, I probably can. It's at the corner of Upper Centennial and Rymo. Let me see if I can get this thing. Basically over here. So this little corner around here, 2,800 acres, is what the city expects to add to its urban boundary sometime in the mid-2020s in order to accommodate more residential growth. Because they think by that time, population projections being what they are, although they're not reasonable, that all the other land will be used up and they'll be able to justify it. But before justifying it, they wanted to put it in the official plan. And the province said, no, you can't do that. Because as soon as you put something like that in the official plan, guess what happens to the farms in that area? Why bother putting any investment in the land when you know your land is going to turn into houses? And the final crop is going to be subdivisions. So they said no, and the city is appealing that decision. And they are appealing that decision because 16 landowners from that area came to council and said, you should appeal that decision. We're appealing that decision because we want to be designated as the place where the growth is going to take place, even though it's 15 years from now. And we're in another OMB hearing over that.
Question or comment in the back?
You mentioned earlier about
the GT area being the largest urban sprawl in North America?
It's the most congested.
Okay.
It's the congestion aspect. There's lots of sprawl everywhere. But in terms of congestion, the GTA Hamilton is being identified as the most congested urban region in North America.
You mean traffic-wise?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that congestion has been calculated as costing us billions of dollars and so on.
It would there not be some influence from government for this project here, because Pearson Airport has been trying to expand for a long, long time. Do you think there isn't some government relationship and influence?
The future for Hamilton Airport, from what I can see, doesn't look terribly bright. We've had no end of stories, media coverage on the great new prospects for the airport. This airline has arrived. And then a few months later, well, that airline has left, but another airline is coming. And we've gone through that process for literally over 50 years. I mean, that goes back to the late 40s.
Toronto Airport is what he's.
Yeah, so in terms of the Hamilton Airport, if you're thinking that this is about supporting the Hamilton Airport, is that your point?
No.
Oh.
The point is, I'm supporting Pearson Airport
Yeah.
and their expansion.
And they hadn't been allowed to?
That's correct.
Right, so how have they managed? Who stood up and said, no, you can't expand in Pearson?
I'm not sure where Pearson can expand that isn't already occupied by suburban
But that's
area.
what I'm saying. You think
Yeah.
there's some government influence if they want to expand this airport here?
Possible, but at this point, we haven't seen the evidence that this airport is an economically sound investment. And generally, small regional airports are having a very hard time of it, and some of them are already being closed. And this one is in danger of losing its control tower right now.
I was at a presentation 10 years ago of a retired air traffic controller, and said that Hamilton will never expand because it's in the middle of a couple of flight paths. And he take off from there, immediately has to make a fast right turn to get out of the way. So they're restricted on traffic to start out with.
So it was a bad location.
Yeah, I've heard things about, it's prone to fog, it's got various kinds of issues associated with it, but it's also, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if so many people have tried and gotten nowhere. And the passenger numbers have been falling steadily for the last 7 years. The cargo numbers are up slightly, but they're really only slightly up. And it's basically all courier traffic.
But I think it goes back to that none of that matters because somebody's making money out of it and they lobbied well.
And the public is the one paying it.
Yeah, but
Obviously.
that's how development works.
The airport is...
My problem with it all the time is it was always under a secret lease agreement. So how much are we subsidizing that, is my question.
Well, we're subsidizing, we know something about the subsidy. It's about 1,600 acres. And we are getting a rent, it was rent-free for the first 10 years for the private company that's running it.
So can we find out who that private company is?
Yeah, it's Strathcona International.
No.
And they have a 40-year lease, and the first 10 years was rent-free, and they started paying in 2007, pardon me, because it was 1996 that they got the lease. And they've been paying somewhere in the range of $75,000 to $150,000 a year rent.
And do we know who owns
On
that company?
1,500 acres. Now you do the calculations on that. You find me someplace you can rent land at that price. And what they've succeeded in doing is they've succeeded in having an asset that's worth at least $500 million, on books anyway, which they can borrow money against. It's been a good deal for them. They're doing fine. They're making substantial profits. They paid out $3-4 million 1 year to their stakeholders, their shareholders, but the city's not getting much out of it.
So they're the winner out of this. Are they the ones that want or are pushing for the
The airport
expansion?
certainly is, the Tradeport is certainly a supporter of this.
Because that increases their assets to borrow again.
That's why Mr. Corsell, I assume, was invited, because he's the president, or immediate past president of the airport. They certainly have been an arguer in favor of it, but it's probably more likely being driven by the landowners themselves and by council's conviction that the more land we have for development, the better off we'll
So
be.
they haven't bought into the damage of urban sprawl yet, they still want to do the same old thing. And when we talk about agricultural land, it's not really a local issue, even though decision-making is local. When you talk about that being prime agricultural land, Ontario has the bulk of it for the country.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we don't have a national food strategy. We don't even have a provincial food strategy, because my perspective is, I mean, that's all wrong too. We should not be sitting here in a municipality getting to decide on the food security issue that affects the entire country. But we are, by the way that we're set up.
Yeah, they said that if you're on the top of the CN Tower, and it's a clear day, which it hardly ever is anymore, you can see 50% of the best agricultural land in the country.
Right. And in the UK, you would not be allowed to make that decision locally because they see food security as a national strategy.
And there are provincial rules, but the provincial rules to this point have not been particularly effective. They've been in place for decades at some level, but they've been sort of optional, and now they're supposed to be more stringent, and some things have changed in terms of blocking strip development along the rural roads, although there's some in this area, particularly along Lancaster, but we're not really seeing yet clear indication that the province is serious about defending this. And the thing about provincial rules that everybody understands is the provincial rules travel with the provincial party that's in power.
Yes.
So in the 1990s, the NDP government brought in change to the provincial policy statement and said, instead of having regard for the provincial policy statement, which means you should read it but you don't have to follow it, you must now conform with it. And when they were defeated and the Harris government came in, they reversed that and said, change it back to have regard for. And when McGuinty came in, he changed it back to, you must conform with it. So if somebody else gets elected, and maybe there's an election next year from the minority government we have, then